Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Today we'll talk about agriculture in Pennsylvania, but first we're joined by Kate Huang-Pu, government reporter from Spotlight, PA. Welcome to our program, Kate.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Some lawmakers are open to legalizing recreational marijuana. Why do they feel that's important?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Pennsylvania will be the 25th state to legalize, so 24 other states have legalized. Most of the states surrounding Pennsylvania has legalized, so first and foremost, it's a huge source of revenue that we're missing out on. There are also folks who are saying, it's not as dangerous as the federal government is saying it is. It's still classified as a Schedule I drug. And there are obviously health benefits as it's legalized for medical purposes in Pennsylvania already.
Well, I understand some lawmakers have a plan for the distribution of recreational marijuana. So who's involved and what do they want to do exactly?
Yeah, I think amongst its supporters, the crux of the disagreement is who's going to be able to sell marijuana. Representatives Dan Frankel and Rick Krajewski, they're both Democrats on the House. They want a state-owned store to be able to sell marijuana. So it's kind of like how Pennsylvania sells liquor in the state. We have fine wine and good spirits. It's owned by the state. So all of that revenue will go directly to the state. Whereas the supporter in the Senate, Senator Laughlin, as well as Senator Street, they haven't introduced a bill yet or released a co-sponsorship memo, but they've said that they plan to. And their version essentially has existing sellers, so predominantly medical marijuana companies, expand their abilities and just move into the recreational market.
Kate, let's go back to Representative Frankel for a minute and consider his idea to set up what would amount to a network of stores to sell marijuana, not unlike state stores selling alcohol. Why is Frankel sold on this idea?
Yeah, I think Frankel and Krajewski, for that matter, think that there's already an infrastructure there, a network there that the state has experience in. It's a way to recoup the most amount of funds, essentially, because this will all be run by the state. And they say it's a more effective way to redistribute funds to communities that have been most impacted by the criminalization of cannabis.
Now, some of our viewers may be thinking that this plan kind of puts the cart before the horse in the sense that it's a distribution plan, but what about legalization of the drug in the first place? Is that included in the bill that would set up this network of stores?
Yes, exactly. There would be a legalization aspect. There would be an expungement aspect. So folks who have nonviolent marijuana-related crimes would have their records expunged. But a lot of these details are still up in the air because, frankly, not everyone in the state legislature is sold on legalization. So it is sort of a matter, as you said, is putting the cart before the horse, where I think folks are still working on for getting everyone on board first.
So if this plan goes through, Kate, and obviously recreational marijuana would have to be legalized, and then Frankel and his colleague are able to set up a store network, what role could a store network play in ensuring the safety of marijuana for the public?
Yeah, I mean, in all of the legalization bills included, there are public safety aspects. There are like consumer safety aspects. So things like making sure that cannabis isn't going to be marketed to kids, that there are very large health warnings on the labeling, sort of details like that. But again, these are details that will need to be worked out before any sort of legislation even hits one chamber or the other.
So what kind of investment would be required to set up this network of stores or marijuana dispensaries, whatever you want to call them?
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of this is to be determined because the stores, or the bill rather, the bill language hasn't been published yet. The Representatives Frankel and Krajewski haven't laid out specifically like how many stores will be permitted, how much cannabis they'll be allowed to sell. So all of those details will be key to figuring out what kind of costs will be included.
Now, some states that have legalized marijuana border Pennsylvania. So do you believe that puts pressure on state lawmakers?
It's certainly what advocates are hoping. At this point, every state except West Virginia has legalized marijuana that borders Pennsylvania. So they're hoping that, we're essentially seeing revenue cross the state border and then come on, folks are coming on back, especially Ohio. So I've spoken to a lot of advocates who are saying, in the last year, Maryland, Ohio have all legalized, 2 years, my bad. But so now they're hoping that Pennsylvania will sort of get on board.
Now let's get back to this proposal about the possibility of selling marijuana in a network of stores here in Pennsylvania. And if that happens, what does the federal law have to say about selling marijuana? That is to say, more accurately, the government selling marijuana. What's the federal government got to say about that?
Yeah, that is a cause for concern amongst cannabis advocates, where at a federal level, marijuana is still illegal. So essentially, state employees will be selling marijuana. And there's a concern that, you can't force state employees to break the laws. So if there is some sort of suit that shows up in the courts, that this state source system will not be able to sort of withstand that. So you're not permitted to preempt federal law.
Kate, in general, are there enough lawmakers in Pennsylvania to get behind a marijuana legalization bill?
That's what my next article is on. I have talked to quite a few members of the Law and Justice Committee now on the Senate side, and they're sort of all saying, it will depend on the text of the bill. They're very concerned about public safety. Those are sort of the details that still need to play out. But I spoke with Senator Reagan, who previously chaired the Law and Justice Committee last session before he retired, and he told me that really he thinks that economics are key. So how much tax revenue, how this will be implemented, and who will be benefiting will be key as to whether or not this kind of legislation passes.
Last question, Kate. Let's make sure we don't neglect the public's point of view in this whole marijuana legalization debate, and just how do they feel? Are there polls out there that show how the public feels about legalizing marijuana?
Yes, there are, and that's one of cannabis advocates' biggest sort of points, where by and large recreational cannabis usage is popular in the state. I believe it's about 2/3 of the state supports legalization. So if this was a referendum, it would pass, and that's how it's passed in other states as well. It's just a matter of getting that legislation through the legislature.
All right, thank you very much. Kate Huang-Pu from Spotlight, PA.
Thank you.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after a short break. Welcome back. Our guests are Nathan Tallman from the PA Co-Operative Potato Growers, Martha Ebersol representing the PA State Association of County Fairs, and Lizzie Bailey from the PA State Council of Farm Organizations. Lizzie, we'll start with you. The annual State Farm Show just wrapped up in Harrisburg this month. What was on your mind as that event took place?
Coming home from the farm show, there's just a diversity, and a lot of our members are at farm show. So it's getting to engage with them and find out what's going on in their wheelhouse, per se, to, kind of stay on top of stuff. So the next thing for us is cornucopia at the state capitol. So that's exactly what's on my mind, even while I'm at farm show, in the midst of finishing up plans for it. And that's on February 4th.
So during the farm show, were there any specific things that came up you care to share with us now that people are talking about that maybe they weren't talking about a year ago?
Yeah. Well, the change of administration and the policies that may be coming down the pike, from the White House is always a concern. One of it is immigration, of course, has been like a hot button topic for people.
How about you, Martha? What were you thinking about during the farm show?
Fairs are an important thing at farm show because they can bring their things that they showed at their county fairs. They can bring that to the farm show and show it. And it is a big thing to bring your products to the farm show because we think of that as our state fair. And so it's very important, and it's exciting to be able to be there.
How about you, Nathan? What was on your mind during farm show week?
Well, during Farm Show Week, usually top of mind is making potato donuts for the hungry crowd.
I'm sure a lot of attendees would agree with you.
Yeah, so keeping our concessions going at Farm Show is always top of mind, but I always enjoy the week. I spend a lot of time with our local growers here in Pennsylvania, and it just reminds me of what a robust industry we have here in Pennsylvania, not only with the snack food manufacturers. We are the snack food capital of the world, and one of our roles at the Co-Operative is supplying those snack food manufacturers with local Pennsylvania-grown potatoes.
Now let's talk about Governor Josh Shapiro. He went to the farm show, and one of the things he said was that he commented on President Trump's, at that time President-elect Trump's, proposal about tariffs and their effect. Shapiro says that Trump's proposed tariffs could shut down foreign markets for PA farmers. How do you see it? Anybody?
Well, for Pennsylvania potatoes, we're not exporting potatoes out of Pennsylvania. We can't get enough potatoes grown in the state to supply the demand we need. So our potatoes are not leaving the state. That would affect potato growers more in the Pacific Northwest, which would be the Washington, Oregon, Idaho area. A lot of those potatoes are exported. So it could affect some of those markets, but that's the job of the new Secretary of Agriculture that President Trump elects. That will be up to them to help, reel him in or regulate some of those policies.
Well, Nathan, you said that there aren't enough potatoes to export anyway because you're just trying to satisfy the demand here in Pennsylvania. That interests me. Tell me more about that.
Well, in Pennsylvania, there's about 5,000 acres of potatoes grown annually. And what a lot of people don't realize is there's more potatoes flow into the state of Pennsylvania than probably out of the state of Idaho. I mentioned earlier, we are the snack food capital of the world. We have more potato chip factories than any other state in the union, and there is a lot of opportunities for the potato growers here in our state to grow more potatoes to feed that monster.
What kind of conditions do you need ideally to grow good potatoes?
So potatoes are part of the nightshade family, so they like hot days and cool nights. So they grow best. The majority of the potato crop comes from Erie County, followed by Potter County. So north of Route 80 has ideal conditions for growing potatoes. And we're close to the market, so there's a freight advantage. We minimize the carbon footprint because our potatoes aren't going far. They're staying right here within our state. So really, one of our biggest challenges is dealing with the competitors that I mentioned in, I'll say, west of the Mississippi, states like Michigan, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, the state of Maine, Canada. There's a lot of potatoes flow into Pennsylvania from Alliston, Ontario. When those potatoes could be supported domestically, we could support our growers here in Pennsylvania, and we wouldn't have to worry about tariffs.
Now, here's what Congressman Dan Muser had to say about Trump's proposed tariff plan. He says that tariffs would make services and food more attractive around the world. And I know your potatoes aren't leaving Pennsylvania, but maybe you can give us some reaction to that or insight.
What did he say again?
Congressman Dan Muser said tariffs would make services and food more attractive around the world.
Okay. Boy, I'm not quite sure what.
Go ahead,
I'm going to
Lizzie.
say why. Why would that make it? Because I just think of a tariff is going to be a cost that's going to be passed down to our consumers who are already stretched with a budget to go to the grocery store.
Indeed, they are.
And there's pressure put on we have a member Feeding Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
and to supply the food banks with people that are on the SNAP programs, people that need to supplement. And it's not only SNAP, it's the middle class utilizing food banks, whereas before I don't know that it was so much.
Right. I agree with you 100% that why is it going to make it any better? It's not, because then you're going to have to increase your price so that you can make it look better or whatever. Yeah.
Now, both major presidential candidates last November campaigned on high grocery bills, which we've acknowledged here. Do farmers have any input as to how those prices are set? In other words, is there anything farmers can do to alleviate prices at the supermarket?
I wish
Talk
that
to your
was the case,
legislators.
because sometimes I think that the farmer, we think that it's them that are getting the additional revenue.
They're not setting the retail price, are they?
No, and they're not benefiting. I know that in the dairy field, the Grange past president always used to drill in me that dairy farmers are making less than what they did in 1981. And so that's a hard reality, when you think about that in today's prices of what we pay for milk.
I think the potato growers, at least the ones I deal with, they're struggling with inflation just like consumers are. Whether they're buying a plowshare, a tractor tire, oil filter, labor on the farm, they're paying more for every input on the farm, just like consumers are paying more for everything they purchase day to day. So the agriculture community is not immune to inflation.
Let's get back to a topic that Lizzie brought up briefly a few minutes ago, and that would be immigration. And maybe our viewers aren't making an immediate connection to agriculture and the immigration situation that is facing us. So make that connection.
Okay. Well, with a lot of the farmers use the H-2A program to have migrant workers come. And
H-2A, what is that, Lizzie?
it's a specific program to have the employees come temporarily into the country to work in the agricultural farms.
Temporarily.
Yeah. So it's a temporary spot. And in them coming, there's certain things. It's a costly program for farmers, and it's very consuming with the paperwork that they're dealing with. And then there's certain criteria, as housing that needs to be provided. But it's a two-way street, because you got to have things good for the migrant worker to come, and turns there's a cost associated. So it's always a balance of what you can afford. It's complicated at times to get the workers. Again, that paperwork, there's a lot of forms, and usually you have to hire a consultant to help you get through your paperwork to apply for that program. And so then some of it too, and I think this is probably across the country, there are undocumented migrant workers here. And in the United States—
How big a workforce do they represent, I wonder, Lizzie?
That, I'm not sure of the percentage, but I would say in agriculture, it's probably a bigger percentage than what we want to think it is. With the migrant workers, they do the work, and they're happy to be here to be working in the agricultural industry. In the United States, we don't necessarily have the U.S. workforce that want to be out on the agricultural farms doing these jobs. And so it's quite a quandary. But it is a balance between cost and getting them here.
And they also affect fares, because the rides that come in, the showmen that have the rides at fairs and stuff, they also apply for them to help them out and are here for a certain period of time, and it helps fares out that way too.
Well, you heard President Trump's deportation plans. He says he's going to start with violent criminals first, but it stands to reason that eventually it would work his way down to those who were just here illegally or undocumented, as Lizzie said.
Yeah, and I think I read, but sometimes, what you read and what is for real is always two different things.
Good question, eh?
Yeah, and so I want to point that out, but it seemed like in the first week that I read there was 2,300 that had already been deported. And so I don't know the validity of that, but it was a number that was tossed out.
There's video on the news that shows immigrants in chains going on planes.
Yep.
That's all I know.
Right.
It was what my eyes told me.
Right.
Yep.
Let's move on to another issue that's making headlines here in Pennsylvania, and that would be the avian flu. And there's a recent development in that story. It just happened yesterday in Lehigh County. They identified their first poultry case in Pennsylvania since last year. Now, none of us are scientists here, but Lizzie, maybe you can tell us, just refresh us on the basics of avian flu, what it is and why it's a problem.
Yeah. Just to put it into very layman's terms, it's a virus like when we get sick, and except it's affecting the poultry, and now there have been instances across the United States that it has affected the cattle or the dairy industry. And so it's a situation that is up in Lehigh County with the farm that they found this first case in Pennsylvania through Josh Shapiro and Secretary Redding at PDA. There's programs there. So there's a team on site. They're already quarantined. And so they are on top of the issue that's going on up there. I didn't know whether there was a correlation between that instance, because last week in the news they had reported that there were the geese that were found dead up in the Lehigh County. So I have yet to read anything if that was even a correlation or not. But it's very much like when we catch a virus and you want to stop it as fast as you can. And you had mentioned a little bit earlier about like the cost of eggs. And, last year, there were so many poultry that were put down that it is a given that the cost of the eggs is going up. And so the last case of 60 eggs I bought was almost $21. And I think that it's, I've been told that we'll see that go higher.
I heard that eggs are up 30% in western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And how does avian flu spread anyway, Lizzie? I mean, it goes from bird to bird. How quickly, how contagious is it?
I think it can be very contagious, and that's why there are biosecurity measures on the farms. And so when I remember reading last year in reference to some of the things that were going on in Lancaster County, that some of it was the people coming in and on the properties at the farms. And so biosecurity is extremely important. You wear your coverage.
Give us an example of biosecurity. A simple one we'll understand.
Well, simple, like covering the shoes when you're walking in.
Is that right? It starts with simple precautions like that, doesn't it?
The clothing, protective gear when you're going in, I think is part of that. And I'm sure there's a whole lot more that I don't understand, but that's something very basic. Even when we take tours, as farms, going out, that we're always covering our heads and covering our feet and putting on a special jacket or whatever. Biosecurity is huge. I can tell you that Chris Huffman from the Pork Association, he's a pig farmer over, I think, in Juniata County, and he told me one time about one of the piglets got off the farm, and he was out searching for it, and when he found it, it was with the people that had pulled over alongside the road. Of course, it was a little piglet, and the people were like, "Oh, we always wanted a pig." And he said, "You know what? It's your lucky day. You can take it home." He couldn't put it back on the farm. He would have had to kill it.
Very interesting.
There's a funny little story.
Well, anyway, getting back to the possible effects of avian flu, let's say a human being eats an egg that came from an infected chicken. Let's just say, how sick might you get?
It's safe to be eating the poultry and the eggs. You use your proper cooking methods in doing it, though. Don't be eating, I would say, don't eat raw eggs, but that's just me. I don't anyhow. But but you definitely have to be properly cooked.
When we did have the avian flu, fairs follow the Department of Ag, what they tell us to do, not to do. But our fairs across the state of Pennsylvania came up with getting a stuffed chicken, letting them in the cages, having judging on that, maybe taking pictures of their chicken, so that the fairs kept on going even though we had the avian flu. But we followed all the guidelines, and it is very important to do that.
And that's got to have quite an impact on your fair, and I wonder how far in advance you have to even prepare the fair in order to be ready when the people come in.
Yep.
Like some decisions have to be made on a moment's notice, I'm thinking.
As soon as they say no eggs, no chickens, you got to put it out there, even though people get upset at you.
And does some of them show up anyway because they hadn't heard the news and you got to turn them away?
And then we say, I'm sorry, you can't come in.
Now, Lizzie, earlier you mentioned dairy farmers. And my understanding is dairy farmers should be alert, is what I'm hearing now, for an avian flu strain that affects cattle. So no reported cases yet in Pennsylvania. That's important.
No, I don't have any news of anything in Pennsylvania, and there's precautions out there too. I know that Executive Deputy Secretary Hostetter came to one of our council meetings, and he discussed about the testing process of milk now even going into the processing plants. So as the truck comes in, that load is being tested to see if there's any signs in the milk product, so they can trace it back and go to the farms.
So let's try to get some closure on the avian flu in general here. How much progress has been made? Are things under control? What kind of precautions do farmers have to observe as of today?
Well, they were under control until we got, and lots of times the avian flu is spread by the wild geese and the wild chickens and the wild birds. That's and then they do droppings, and then the chickens
Right.
step in it, and there's nothing that you're going to be able to do about that.
Yeah.
But hopefully farmers are taking the precautions of when they go in to see their chickens, they're putting on covering their shoes, doing that kind of stuff. And it doesn't hurt any of us to take precaution in whatever we're doing, paying attention to what's out there.
I mean, it's also important for people with their backyard flocks to pay attention. You know, a lot of homeowners have, 5, 6 chickens. If they see an issue where they're not doing well or passing away, it's important that they report that to Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, and that we can continue to keep our arms around the problem. But PDA has done an amazing job keeping it controlled with, just recently as yesterday, we haven't heard about it since when? Last October, right?
Right. And I can tell you that, like with Governor Shapiro's support and with the PDA department, they've been on top of this. We can be fortunate that we're in Pennsylvania with the things that they've put into play to keep us safe and be right on top of like the situation at Lehigh, that there's a team on site and quarantined already.
All right, I'm going to give our guests a break just for a minute while we look at program notes for PCN. Wednesdays on the Issues has Mia Haney from the PA Home Care Association on the subject of home health care workers. That's at 7 p.m. Then right after that program at 7:30 p.m. we'll have Representative Ed Nielsen on the subject of security for digital data. On Journalist Roundtable this week, our guests will be John Cole from the PA Capitol Star, Jillian McGoldrick from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Linda Stein from the Delaware Valley Journal. They'll tell us about the latest events at the state capitol on Thursday at 7 p.m. The top cheerleading teams from across Pennsylvania are set to meet at the PIAA Competitive Spirit Championships in the city of Reading. You can watch that on Friday live at 12 noon. City and State Magazine is bringing together decision makers and policymakers for their annual Pennsylvania Healthcare Summit. We'll have that event for you Friday at 4 p.m. The public affairs coverage you watch on PCN TV is now free of charge on the internet. Go to PCNTV.com and check out our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. All right, let's get back to our discussion here. We're talking about agriculture in Pennsylvania. We just wrapped up a discussion about avian flu. Let's move on to something called the Federal Farm Bill. And I understand that is due to be renewed this year. And before we speculate on that, what's in the current version that would benefit Pennsylvania farmers or the public? What can you tell us about the Farm Bill?
The Pennsylvania or the Federal Farm Bill benefits Pennsylvania potato growers. There's funding in the Farm Bill. It's specialty crop block grant funding, and the Co-Operative is also nonprofit. So we can apply to Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture for those funds. They're regulated by the USDA. It's specialty crop block grant funding. We then work with Penn State University to do research on potato varieties and develop new varieties that are disease resistant, better yielding, higher gravity, which means there's more dry matter in the potato, so at the chip plants they get a better yield when they fry the potato. So that is very important funding for our growers and the potato industry overall. There's a lot of funding for that research that all the land-grant universities use.
It didn't occur to me that we'd have to do research into finding more potatoes that are disease-resistant. Very interesting. How frequently does that science even change or be updated?
Well, it can take as long as a decade to develop a new variety.
Is that right?
So they'll cross varieties and they'll do small plots. Cornell University is a potato breeding university, Michigan State, North Carolina, and University of Maine. So they're all working on developing new varieties.
So they're growing these new potatoes and then one day they go eureka.
Well, they'll take cuttings from two different plants and they make a cross, and I'm not sure of all the science. And then there'll be a variety that'll be NY 143, and then that'll be trialed all across the country over multiple years until you find the new golden goose, and then growers will jump on that new variety, and hopefully it's better yielding, and like it could be drought tolerant or disease resistant. So that funding is critical to not only Pennsylvania, but all of the potato industry nationally.
Well, funding in the form of grants sounds exciting. I wonder if you can look forward to similar funding for fairs, Martha.
We do get funding for fairs. We right now are $4 million that we get to fund fairs to do different things. Fairs also work together with potato growers because we will maybe get a sponsor to sponsor something at our fair. So it helps them do that. But that's very exciting about potatoes.
Sure. And what about as far as nutrition is concerned? And we know that hunger can be a problem in Pennsylvania. And there's a program called SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food for eligible families. What are farmers doing to address hunger in Pennsylvania? Can they do anything outside of growing the products themselves?
There are different farms, and I know that there's one in Juniata County, and Martha, you may know the name of that particular. But they go through after the harvest has taken place, and they'll go back through and take like the seconds and such from even the apple orchard, or is that also in potatoes? And they're dispersed to the food bank programs.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so it's a funding, they'll go through and they'll gather it and they'll take it and it goes to the food banks to help supplement.
Right,
And
so this is a regular occurrence?
Yes, and I think, I know of that one in Juniata County, but I'm sure that happens across Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
with
I would say it would. I would say it would, yes.
So let's talk about new technology. And it seems like any discussion we bring up here at PCN eventually just leads to technology, and often that leads to a discussion about drones. And I think how a drone will be handy on a farm. And Nathan, maybe you use drones on potato farms, or at least do you recognize the value of them?
There's limited drone usage, but it's building some growers are using drones to identify diseases in the field, when to apply fungicides for, of course, potato blight, which caused the Irish potato famine. That's one of potato growers' biggest concerns. So they're using those drones to scout the fields. What I see being used on most potato farms is now the use of robotics to stack the 50-pound bags. A lot of the growers have transitioned. Normally you had 2 or 3 laborers at the end of the line stacking the bags. So robotics are being used now to stack the bags. When potatoes go to a grocery store, there is a paper sack with 10 5-pound bags in a sack. So they're using robotics to also fill those types of bags that previously that was done by hand. So.
And obviously there's a cost involved in buying these robots. I just wonder how high a cost that is, and can the average potato farmer afford it?
Some can afford it, some can't. It's depending on the operation and scale and how much they want to invest. Usually they end up paying for themselves because a robot never calls in sick or doesn't show up to work.
Sure.
And I also think there's companies that offer those services too. I know that we're getting ready to have the Pennsylvania Young Farmers for their midwinter conference, and one of our speakers is coming to talk about drone use. His is more used, I think, for corn crops, but also for spraying, like Nathan had mentioned, is an important component to the drones.
One of the technologies that's really being utilized, I would say, heavily by most farmers is the GPS of the tractors and sprayers. You can set up a sprayer to travel across the field, and based on lower or higher nutrition values across that field, it'll be turning nozzles on and off, or there's no one manually operating that sprayer or driving the tractor. It helps you utilize all your land because you have nice straight rows and everything is mapped out. That is being used by a lot of farmers.
And that's just due
GPS.
to GPS. I don't think that would occur to most people. That'd be useful on the farm.
Right.
Right. And then a downside with that is in areas where we don't have broadband, the internet service for the new equipment that's coming out.
Right.
And there's farms in areas that can't utilize the perks of the machinery. And the cost of the machinery are expensive, and not to be able to have that
So we don't
component.
have high-speed internet statewide yet, huh?
No,
No, we do not.
No. We wished we did.
And as far as the drone is concerned, I'm just trying to visualize the advantage a drone can have over, say, the naked eye at eye level. You can see certain things from high up, can't you? There's an advantage from that perspective. Try to make our viewers appreciate that.
Well, I mean, the drones usually have a camera on.
What might they reveal from that perspective that you don't see at normal eye level?
It would be disease pressure in the field that you wouldn't see from your general scouting. Like a lot of the scouting is done, by walking the fields, walking the rows. You're able to do some of that scouting now with the drone.
As far as local fairs and the economy, Martha, here's a phrase you often come across when you're reading about state fairs. They say it's where agriculture and tourism meet. So maybe some of our viewers haven't been to a fair. Maybe they haven't even been to the farm show. Try to paint a picture about what goes on at a county fair.
Well, county fairs are important in all communities. We just did a impact study, and fairs economically are helping areas, all areas. So we bring in quite a bit. But you go to a fair, we have animals there that children have grown and bring. We have equipment there, farm equipment that people can see how the farmers are doing, what they're doing, how more advanced they are becoming than they were.
Tractors have come a long way. That much I
Tractors
noticed.
have come a long way. Yep.
Enclosed
And-
cabins, comfortable climate.
Yep, air conditioning.
Right.
Yep, all that good stuff. And then we just go from local farmers that grow different things, bring them in, enter them, getting and reaching out to other potato growers, for example, have them sponsor things, bring a recipe using potatoes, doesn't matter what it is.
Sure.
And have that sponsor, and vegetables and different things like that. So a fair is awesome. A fair has something for everybody. And people just don't realize in our communities how much fairs offer to those out there.
And something else that people might not realize or appreciate is that some fairs go back 150 years.
Oh, yeah.
That's a long time. So what traditions in your mind still endure that are relevant today?
Well, we still enter produce. We still have machinery that has come a long way.
We still have ribbons and
we
blue
still
ribbons.
have blue ribbons. We still have, I'm trying to think of everything.
Well,
let's talk-
fairs are a lot like farm show. There's always
Right.
that classic food item that people are there to get.
Yes.
There's always that church or fire company that's made, the classic whoopie pie or,
Right.
a cheese steak that you can only get it one time a year. I know, like, I'm from Berks County, so at our hometown fair is the Kutztown Fair, and it's one of those fairs that's 150 years old. But the local Lions Club does what's called Dutch fries, which is a thinly sliced potato that they fry. It's like a fresh
Hadn't heard of that.
chip. And
Sounds
then,
good.
Yep. And then they also do a fresh sausage sandwich. It also gives an opportunity for the 4-H kids to show their animals.
FFA.
Right.
FFA.
Yeah.
It's a great way for children to learn and respect and raise an animal, and have a reason to visit the barn every day. Creates responsibility, leadership. It helps them with public appearances, public speaking.
And a lot of fairs have demonstrations. We try to get the kids involved in learning about agricultural, that
Right.
it just doesn't come from the store, where it comes from and where it goes. Milk just doesn't come out of a carton, that kind of
Right.
stuff. All fairs try to present that at our fairs so people understand.
And that's what I was going to elaborate on, that, and it's not only just children. I think there's adults that don't necessarily think about where their food source is coming from. And I know during COVID, when it was showing on our TVs about the milk being dumped in local areas.
That was the phrase they used. Milk is being dumped.
Right. And then my phone was ringing off the hook. And I was like, they were wanting to know why. And then they were wanting to know, like, where do we go? And that's something that I've always preached to people. Know your food sources 50 miles from your home. What about 100 miles? Because in Pennsylvania, it's nothing to have to travel a distance for things. But we need to know where those local farmers are that we can get our food sources from, too, in times of, toughness.
And that's one of the things we do. We at the fairs where we have a large sect of potato growers, we'll put up a small booth advertising the local growers of that area. So we always have a representation at the Potter County Fair. We also have one out in Erie. We do one in the Lehigh Valley at the Allentown Fair. We try and let those local consumers know where they could go to buy local.
Where their local farms are. Because if you don't tell them, how else are they going to find out?
Right.
I buy my potatoes in Potter County.
Again, Martha, I'm going to ask you about Secretary Russell Redding has said county and local fairs pump $1 billion in the economy every year. So can you elaborate on that? I mean, it's got to involve jobs and filling up hotels, I suppose.
Jobs, filling up hotels, getting maybe local people to work that week. It also gets your community involved so that all organizations are working together. And fairs do bring money into your areas. Even if you don't think so, we do. And it's important for fairs to be out there, and it's important for your communities to know that fairs are out there. And that's why I said it's important to work together with other organizations so that you're all on the same level, always promoting the same thing, because we're all out there trying to help the farmers, we're trying to help marketing, we're trying to help machinery people. We're trying to make leaders out of 4-Hers, FFAers, so that they can lead and keep fairs going, keep farming going. We bring in a lot of finances to the economy there.
Now, Martha, tell us more about the FFA in general for our viewers who might not know anything about that organization and what they're doing with young people.
FFA is Future Farmers of America. They're in most schools, and they learn how to do flowers, grow plants, take care of bugs or things that would maybe interfere with their growing. Teach them how to raise animals and how to be leaders in our society, and how to keep pushing agricultural fodder along.
Now, speaking of young people, farming has a history of being passed down from one generation to the next. In recent years, how has that changed?
Well, you can't run a farm from an iPhone, so that's one big thing. Because I don't think they like to go out and do manually labor. So you can't run a farm using your iPad. You can.
You have to literally get your hands dirty, don't you?
Yes.
There's a lot of younger people in the farming industry that are looking at different educational avenues that maybe be related to farming, but it isn't doing the manual work on the farm.
It doesn't involve going in the field, but it's valuable research.
It's still valuable. So there's been a shift in that dynamics, as to who's working on the farm. In Pennsylvania, through the Farm Bill, there is like a succession program. We have farm preservation programs that help get their farms listed that they need to stay into agriculture, and they get a funding source for being in that program, when they sign on to it. I'd like to mention in Perry County, I know for a fact that farmers signed in succession and they wouldn't take the payment. And I was always proud to tell people that they signed up and didn't expect anything in return for that. but it's a very different society to operate in. And so having that person to hand it down to and connecting, PA Farm Link does a great job with doing the educational components to training about plans of succession and how to get the younger person coming into farming and how it can be affordable. Because when you look at the farm prices and they're up for sale, I don't even know how somebody young would even entertain taking on a farm. So.
Is the state doing anything to engage people? In other words, is the agriculture department in there and trying to get young people involved? And I wonder how they do it.
Funding is a big thing, and PA Farm Link receives grants through the PDA to do the educational components that they do. Most organizations have, I think some kind of funding source that they can get from PDA to do the educational components.
4-H and FFA also get funding from there to do different programs to help educate their children.
Now, we only have a few minutes left in this segment of our program, so I want to explore your respective organizations. So, Lizzie, let's go back to you and tell me about the PA State Council of Farm Organizations. What are you doing there?
Yeah. Well, basically, we started in the early 1900s. We are a nonpartisan organization that we go out and we discuss issues, not partisan politics. And so that gives us, a different slant. Our membership, we have about 50 in our membership base that are associations, businesses, groups, or we even have associate individual members. So what's
Are they necessarily directly related to farms, your members?
There's some that aren't. There are some that, are like maybe the insurance. I mean, they have a link to it, but it's not like what you think of being knee-deep in agriculture. So, but for the majority, they are a lot of agricultural organizations that we represent. But we bring forth a very diverse membership that has diverse views, and we educate each other as they come in for speakers. They tell us about their industries. We all learn from each other through the educational programming that we put on. And we have the cornucopia where the commodities will be showcased at the Capitol on the 4th, and the political leaders are invited. So last year, I want to say we had 230 of the political members come down and learn about things from the commodities.
Nathan, you gave us some interesting insights on growing potatoes, so I want to know more about your organization, the PA Cooperative Potato Growers, and who are your members and what are the issues that are in front of you right now?
So we're based here in Harrisburg on Front Street. The cooperative, we're in our 103rd year of business. People probably know us most well for what we do at the farm show. Our potato donuts, french fries, baked potatoes. We were one of the first food items at farm show. The potato growers were selling baked potatoes out of coolers on Cameron Street for 5 cents a piece to the traffic coming in. We advocate for the industry. We have 30 growers in Pennsylvania who are part of the cooperative. The profits at the end of our fiscal year are returned to the growers in the form of dividends. We go to Washington, D.C. to advocate for that specialty crop block grant funding. We help our growers market potatoes to the snack food manufacturers as well as some retailers here in the state. So basically, the chip companies will come to the cooperative and they ask for X amount of potatoes at X price. We negotiate that price for the growers. They know what they're getting for the potatoes before they even plant them. Once the potatoes are harvested, we then execute those contracts, organize the logistics, and make sure they arrive to the plant in good condition. And we not only do that in Pennsylvania, but we're also doing that for farmers in Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, New Jersey, Indiana, Michigan, and Maine. So year-round, the Pennsylvania Cooperative Potato Growers supplies potatoes to the snack food manufacturers. So the Pennsylvania crop starts in August and usually runs out in April. But then in May, we start in Florida. June, it's North Carolina, and we kind of work our way up the coast. So we're always trading potatoes there on Front Street.
And they call South Central Pennsylvania snack capital of the world for a reason, because there's plenty of potatoes going there.
Yep. And we just have a diverse, people don't realize if you go to a state like Texas or California, if you go in the grocery store, the only potato chip you could buy is Lay's Frito-Lay.
True.
In the Northeast here, you have selection of 10 to 15 different offerings depending on the retailer you're in. So we are unique. We like our fried foods here in Pennsylvania, and that was from the Pennsylvania Dutch culture here. So.
How about you, Martha? Now, tell us about your organization that has to do with fairs in Pennsylvania. We have about 2 minutes left.
The State Fair Association, we have 107 fairs. We are a volunteer organization. We are community-minded. We reach out to the community to help us with volunteers to supply us. We do things statewide. We do things nationally wide. We support each other when needed. We help each other out when we need it. And we also work together with other organizations so that we all stay involved and keep things going.
Our guests have been Nathan Tallman from the PA Cooperative Potato Growers, Martha Ebersol, representing the PA State Association of County Fairs, and Lizzie Bailey from the PA State Council of Farm Organizations. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
PCN's Ellen Franz talked to Senator Devlin Robinson about radon testing in schools.
Welcome to our program. You've proposed a bill that deals with radon. For those who are unfamiliar, what is radon?
Radon is a radioactive, colorless, odorless gas that occurs naturally within the ground that permeates through the soil. It can be poisonous if you take on too much throughout your life. It can be poisonous, and it can lead to lung cancer in non-smokers.
How is radon detected?
Since it's colorless and odorless, you actually need to collect it in a charcoal vial and send it to a lab for testing.
Your bill specifically impacts schools with radon. How will this help them?
Well, children, their lungs are smaller and they're developing, and they take in a lot more oxygen, and they actually breathe a lot more often than adults. So they're actually 20 times more likely, if they're exposed to radon, to develop lung cancer. So we want to make sure that that they're the ones that are protected most.
What are the current legal requirements for radon testing in schools?
So right now, schools are just encouraged to test. Only 24 schools throughout the Commonwealth have tested in the past, and it showed that 40% had elevated levels of radon. So at that level, it could be more, it could be less, but we're not going to know until we test all the schools.
So under your bill, what will the requirement for school testing be?
We're going to provide the necessary funds to have every school adequately tested in the Commonwealth.
What made you want to propose this bill?
I just know that Pennsylvania sits in a very precarious spot on the earth. It has one of the highest levels of radon in the country, and we want to make sure, that all 67 counties have tested for elevated levels of radon. So we want to make sure that we go in and mitigate any of those problem areas throughout the Commonwealth.
Why is Pennsylvania's radon levels different from other states?
It's really just where it sits on the earth. There's larger deposits of radioactive material in the soil that, as it decays, it just kind of permeates through the soil and into your homes and into a lot of office buildings and, unfortunately, schools.
Lastly, where is this bill in the legislative process now?
Well, today is actually the first day that we're in session. So this is the first day of the new legislative year. So we're introducing it. We're taking all the stakeholders' input, and we're going to come out with a finished product that can hopefully get it over the finish line.
Senator Devlin Robinson, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks to Ellen for that interview. Before we go, a reminder, City and State Magazine is bringing together decision makers and policymakers for their annual healthcare summit. We'll show that to you on Friday at 4 p.m. That's it for the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Kasper. Thanks for watching.